of the Massachusetts, Nipmuc, Pawtucket, and Wampanoag people. We pay respect to those Indigenous peoples who lost their lives in the colonization of this land and recognize that these Indigenous tribes are still facing violations of sovereignty, territory, and water. We also give thanks for the earth we walk upon, the waters, the life-giving plants, and all Earth's creatures, as well as the wind, sun, moon, and stars. We recognize that this is just the first step in moving towards right relationship with Native peoples and the healing of the earth. Good morning, and welcome to the First Parish Church of Stowe and Acton, a welcoming spiritual community. My name is Brendan Chetwin, and I serve as your Vice President on the Board of Trustees. If this is your first time with us, we welcome you. Please let us know you are here by filling out our visitor information cards in the pews and hand it to an usher, drop it in the plate, or hand it to Meg, our welcoming staff member. Our minister and staff are listed on the front of the order of service. Please feel free to ask me or any of these people for more information about the church and its programs after service, or by email or through the chat if you're online. If you would like a large print order of service or hymnal or an assisted listening device, please ask our ushers. Our assisted listening devices are actually small radios, which anyone is welcome to use to listen to the service from another space in or around our building for any reason. After the service, please join us for coffee and conversation in our fellowship hall, which is one level down at the other end of our building, or in a breakout room if you're joining us online. I'd like to draw your attention to the announcements in our order of service, and also invite you to check out our webpage for more information. And you can also sign up there for our newsletter and email alerts. And now, let us come together in a time of community, singing, and worship. And I do have a few special announcements. The first of which is I am not Johanna Pyle, who is scheduled to be here today. And like all good things, sometimes things change. And so I'm here to help out. Our accompanist Trevor is out sick today. So that was our music director, Chris Hosfield, playing the Prelude and our other musical pieces today. So he will be a busy fellow. Opening words today will be read by Rayla Baldwin-Matson, our Director of Religious Education. And our covenant and affirmation will be led by Meg Rivers-Wright, our welcoming and administration coordinator. And then finally, I want to highlight that in our Senior Concerns Seminar Series, the first one starts this afternoon, August 24th, from 1 to 3 p.m. It's about estate planning for Massachusetts residents.
I invite you to take a moment to greet your neighbor.
Our opening words are called Welcome and Listen by the Reverend Dr. Natalie Maxwell Fenimore, from To Wake to Rise, Meditations on Justice and Resilience. Natalie is a religious educator and a UU minister. She is also someone I have collaborated with on several writings. And she also does a lot of, advanced learning for religious educators. So I'm excited to share her words this morning. Though you have broken your vows 1,000 times, come yet again, come. These words of Rumi speak to the welcome that is at the heart of Unitarian Universalism. We seek to be a home for all who desire our company. We seek to make a welcome for all those in search of our good news. Come, come, little children, teens, young adults, adults and elders. Come, families and great diversity. Come to this loving home and safe harbor, but not to find a place to escape the world. This is a community of engagement and of creativity. We come together to create boldly, dangerously, We must create the beloved community with an awareness of how difficult it is, because it is hard work. It is work that challenges us to bring our whole selves and engage deeply and for the long haul. Our faith, our tradition must call us into community. Our task is to create spaces where we might know and value each other. I am here, like each of you, offering my life story as a gift to Unitarian Universalism, as a gift to you. I offer my story as an African-American woman, as a mother of children of color, as a Unitarian Universalist religious educator. We must listen to our stories. To reconcile, we need to make peace with the past, not by ignoring it, but by looking at it clearly from many sides, and then move into renewed relationships. We must gain and grow from our knowledge of each other. We have all experienced times of pain, grief, and conflict that have separated us. We need to be reconciled with something or someone. Here in our faith, we can try to forgive when forgiveness is possible. Our ears are open to hear each other's voices. Our eyes are ready to see each other clearly. Our hearts are enlarged to hold each other's pain and joy. Our arms intertwined in embraces as we journey. Don't give up. Don't stop listening to one another. And now I'd like to invite Meg to join me up front for our chalice lighting. Mm-hmm. As we all learn together. The flaming chalice is the symbol of Unitarian Universalism, and we light it at the beginning of our service. Today, in doing so, may we remember how it began as a symbol to mark houses of welcome, houses of safety in Nazi-occupied Europe. As we hear of the neo-Nazis marching in Massachusetts, we light it today to say we are still a house of welcome and of safety. And now please rise in body or spirit for our morning hymn, hymn number 38, Morning Has Broken.
Yes, now that you've seated yourselves, please rise as you are willing and able. That you've done one squat now, so your legs are worked out. Good morning. My name is Meg Rivers-Wright, and I oversee administration and membership here at the church. And out of curiosity, would you please raise your hand if this is your first time here with us today? Yay. Thank you. Welcome. Thank you for coming. We are honored. We will say the covenant and affirmation now, and the covenant is in the left-hand column in your order of service, and we speak that aloud. And the affirmation is in the right-hand column, and we sing that. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
For all those joys and sorrows that are left unspoken, we'll light one last candle if we have one down there. And our words for prayer or meditation come from the pagan priestess or author and feminist author Starhawk from her book, Dreaming the Dark, Magic, Sex, and Politics. 3 things we talk about here in church, right? Except not so much politics if it is partisan. But other than that, she writes, we are all longing to go home to some place we have never been, a place half remembered and half envisioned. We can only catch glimpses of from time to time. Community. Somewhere there are people to whom we can speak with passion without having the words catch in our throats. Somewhere a circle of hands will open to receive us. Eyes will light up as we enter. Voices will celebrate with us whenever we come into our own power. Community means strength that joins our strength to do the work that needs to be done. Arms to hold us when we falter. A circle of healing, a circle of friends, some place where we can be free. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen. Well, Chris, our plan to skip the walk and rain verse so that it wouldn't rain was foiled by nature. Instead of a reading today, we have a video, and this is Lisa Cron for her Tony Award acceptance speech for writing the lyrics and book for the musical Fun Home, which is based on the book Fun Home by Alison Bechdel, who you may also have heard of from the famous Bechdel test, which is when you judge a movie by whether there's any moment in it where two women speak to each other without talking about a man. And that makes a movie like more gender equitable if that occurs. Alison Bechdel is also the author of the comic book, the long series comic series called Dykes to Watch Out For. So you may have heard of her through that too. So this is Lisa Cron in her Tony Award speech. Enjoy.
Oh my goodness. Okay. I know I have a time limit, so if I get this, I want to be efficient. Okay. Fun Home was made by a perfect collaboration of exactly the right people to work on this show. Perfect cast and designers and producers and press and marketing and agents and a perfect theater and circle in the square and the perfect source material with Alison Bechdel's brilliant book and the perfect director in Sam Gold and the perfect composer with Janine Tesori. For many, many years, I have had a recurring dream, and I don't mean a metaphorical dream. I don't mean a Martin Luther King dream. I mean an actual while I'm sleeping dream, that I suddenly discovered that the apartment I live in has a whole bunch of rooms that I didn't know were there. And I'm like, how did I not know about all these rooms? And I've been thinking about that dream as I've been thinking about this amazing Broadway season, because we all live in this big house, and we've all been sitting in the same one or two main rooms and thinking that this was the whole house. And this season, some lights got turned on in some other rooms. And we're all like, oh my God, this house is so much bigger than I thought. We're like, I didn't know that we had a garden. I didn't know we had a freaking ballroom. This pantry is full of food. I had no idea. The thing is, all those other rooms have always been there, and there have always been really interesting people in them doing ravishing things. And wouldn't it be so great if after this season, we didn't all just go back into the living room? This has been the most successful season in Broadway history because all of us have been going into all of these amazing rooms in our house where we live together that we haven't been in before. You guys, our house is so big. Please, let's not just all go back into the living room. Thank you.
This is the time now for our morning offering. We share our weekly offering here at First Parish Church with a different social service agency every month that we voted on as a community to support. This month, our plate is shared with Blank. it says in the order of service. And I believe that the answer is the Concord Prison Outreach. Is that right? Yes, I'm seeing nods. Concord Prison Outreach does wonderful work bringing programs into the Concord prisons. And so for the good work of their organization and for the voluntary support of our church, we gratefully receive any gifts you give us today. Thank you, choir. And thank you, Chris. So Marilyn Sewell, a UU minister, writes in a sermon titled Radical Hospitality. Hospitality is a word with a spiritual history. As a matter of fact, monasteries grew up around the 5th century. Strangers in need could come there for care. The first primitive hospitals, in fact, began there. Hospital, hospice, hospitable, hospitality, all from the same root word, meaning generous, caring, sustaining. The theme of welcoming the stranger, of being hospitable, and welcome is prevalent in all sorts of religious traditions. And welcome is prevalent in all sorts of religious stories. Particularly, we know it, I know it from the Abrahamic traditions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. In the Jewish tradition, we see in the ritual of the Passover Seder, an empty seat is always left open for Elijah. And we see it in the Sodom and Gomorrah story, actually, a story often used for negative purposes, but it's really a story about guest rights and about how only Lot was willing to give the strangers welcome, and the villagers wanted him to send his guests out to them, and he refused. Refused because it was against hospitality rules. And the visitors were really angels or envoys from God. So here's another story of hospitality from the Hindu tradition, this one by Swami Tayagananda. Disguised as a wandering mendicant, Krishna visits a wealthy family who welcomes him warmly and offers him hospitality that matches both their devotion and their prosperity. When it is time to leave, he blesses his host profusely, promising him even more wealth and glory. Krishna's next visit is to a poor widow whose only possession is a cow. She too welcomes him with great devotion, but all she can offer is a glass of milk. And when it is time to leave, Krishna blesses her and tells her that her cow will die soon. Arjuna, who has accompanied Krishna to both places, is horrified. And he asks Krishna, your wealthy hosts lacked nothing, and yet you blessed them with more wealth, whereas your blessing to the poor devotee accompanied the ominous news that she will lose her cow. That's unfair and unacceptable. And Krishna smiles and tells Arjuna, my wealthy host is insanely attached to his wealth and his reputation. He has a long way to go before he becomes spiritually awakened. On the other hand, this poor devotee is already far advanced on the spiritual path. The only thing separating her from her highest freedom is her attachment to her cow. I removed the hurdle from her path. So we see this idea that God can come in the form of a visitor is used in a way that transcends culture, used as an example to tell us all essentially that we should be welcoming every stranger, because you never know when that stranger might be an angel, might be the Messiah, or might be God. Another example of religious welcome comes from the poem Red Brocade by Naomi Shihab Nye. She writes, the Arabs used to say, when a stranger appears at your door, feed him for 3 days before asking who he is, where he's come from, where he's headed. That way, he'll have strength enough to answer. Or by then you'll be such good friends, you don't care. Let's go back to that. She continues, rice, pine nuts, here, take the red brocade pillow. My child will serve water to your horse. No, I was not busy when you came. I was not preparing to be busy. That's the armor everyone puts on to pretend they had a purpose in the world. I refuse to be claimed. Your plate is waiting. We will snip fresh mint into your tea. One of the reasons I love the speech by Lisa Cron that we heard earlier is a reason I'm not even sure she's aware of. But the point she's making is tied to a Christian biblical reference. In this dream of hers, in this dream, she talks about this dream that her house has more rooms than the rooms of which she's aware. And she uses it as a metaphor, how we can include all kinds of stories in Broadway, how we can celebrate and include a diversity of people in our home. And she's asking she's making what for many people would also be a biblical allusion at the same time. One famous passage in the Bible is from the book of John, chapter 13, where Jesus says, "I am the way and the truth and the light. No one comes to the Father except through me." And a lot of people use that phrase to limit their faith of who is welcome in God's home, who will get to heaven. And they think that only the select group of people who believe what they believe will get there. An ultimate example of that is in Calvinism, where only the elect, only the predestined people to go to heaven are those who will. But there's a much more expansive understanding of this phrase that comes when you look at the words surrounding it. A few verses before that, Jesus says something that makes the statement much more expansive. And without it, I don't think people really understand what he means in that sentence a few sentences later, which people can take so literally, but without understanding the larger context. Jesus says something that I think is also at the heart of universalism. He says, "My Father's house has many rooms. If that were not so, would I have told you that I am going there to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, so that you may also be where I am. You know the way to the place where I am going." So there it is. My Father's house has many rooms. If that were not so, would I have told you that I am going to prepare a place for you? Jesus is talking about radical welcome, I think, a welcoming of many faiths, a welcoming of all types of people, a welcoming of all people, period, to his Father's house. So the path to the Father's house is with Jesus. He will take you there, no matter what. He will take all of us there, he is saying. So when he says that there's no way to the Father's house but through him, I think he's merely saying not that we can only get to heaven by believing in Jesus. He's saying about universalism. All are welcome, all are accepted, all are embraced, all are holy and worthy and good, because his Father's house has many rooms and everyone will get there with him. Or as Lisa Cron said, "You guys, our house is so big. Let's not just go back into the living room." That's what's so fantastic about the universalist heritage of universal salvation, whether or not you believe in God. And I don't. I'm an agnostic or atheist some days, depending on what day you ask me. But the universalist heritage says that if there is a God, we're all going to heaven, whether you believe or not. And so I say, if there is a God, God is not worried about whether or not I believe. There's too much work to be done here on earth. And so when the Universalist Church began expanding its theologies, and the Unitarian Church came together with it and embraced their doors ever wider and wider, they became this faith that welcomes all. In the 1960s and 1970s, we embraced civil rights, and we embraced feminism, and we embraced a little bit later gay rights, and we opened our understandings of justice and equality and who is welcome in our doors wider. And at the same time, we opened our church theologically to welcome agnostics and atheists and Wiccans and pagans. And so I can make a worship service today that quotes Starhawk and also quotes a story about Krishna. And we moved from a faith that's saying universalism or Unitarianism, one God, to a faith that says one God, many gods, no gods, all are welcome across these various theologies. But when I heard Lisa Cron's words, I also thought about how many of our houses of faith, houses of worship, have many rooms, but sometimes we are only living in the living room, this sanctuary, or in the living room and dining room, the sanctuary and fellowship hall, if we're talking literally. But metaphorically, for many years also, metaphorically, We may have been living in the rooms of the house of where worship style is a white Protestant style we've inherited from our Puritan ancestors, and not realizing that our faith is so much larger than that. And so we have a religious obligation to understand that our house is bigger. Our house is more expansive, and to welcome the stranger. So here's an example of a place where sometimes Unitarian Universalists have not done as well as we could have. This article is from the UU World many years ago by my friend Derek Jackson, who's a UU minister and works for the UU Ministers Association. Derek recently moved to the Boston area, and I'm pleased to tell you I've invited him to preach here this April, while some of you will be at Ferry Beach. Derek has, I'm also going to tell you another amazing thing about Derek. Derek has more than once played a Klingon, like the Klingons in Star Trek, in a Star Trek production, a Klingon production of A Christmas Carol. So what that tells you about Derek is not only that he can act, but he can also speak Klingon. He also happens to be African American, which is relevant to this article that I'm about to read, in which he talks about ways that Unitarian Universalism hasn't been entirely welcoming to him and his cultural heritage. He says, growing up in the AME church, I was presented with images of spirituality grounded in my Black identity. The worship service and religious education both reference Black history and Black culture. I learned how my cultural struggle and my identity interfaced with the biblical narrative. When I became a Unitarian Universalist, it was clear that my history and my culture were not reflected in the worship and religious education. I could connect on the level of my humanity, but my identity was rarely represented except on special days, Martin Luther King Jr. Day, Black History Month, and Kwanzaa. In those moments, I felt other. I felt that my culture was on display, not an inclusive part of the service. I read this and I wondered, how often are we asking people to leave one part of themselves at the door? And how can we become a house where people are welcomed for all of who they are? How can we be a step better? And I think this church, First Parish Church of Stowe and Acton, we're trying to do that. We've been doing that one step at a time. And we're not perfect. But when we added our land acknowledgement to the beginning of the service, it was a way of saying we're recognizing the complexity of who we are, rooted in the colonial Puritan times, with roots that go back to the colonization of this land, the theft of this land. And when we added our Black Lives Matter banner over our door, we hung it and said, we recognize the inequality in this world, and we need to make a stand to state where we are, and that we recognize when we say our first UU principle, that we believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every person, that principle is not realized until all lives matter, and that all lives don't matter until we say Black Lives Matter and mean it and live it. When we became a welcoming congregation many years ago to LGBTQ people, we recognized that nobody would know. In a world where so many faiths are closed to LGBTQ people, nobody would know we were opening and welcoming until we said it, voted it, proclaimed it for all to know, and put it on our orders of service and websites and other documents saying we are welcoming, we welcome you here. So we are first and foremost making our statements, hanging our banners, because we recognize the importance of these issues, but also because we need this community to know we're a house of welcome. And at the same time, while we can be proud of who we are in so many ways, we are also saying, what do we do next? What are we missing? Our land acknowledgement says this. It says this is just a first step. We recognize it doesn't do everything. So we're still looking. What are we missing? What do we do next? When we hang our banner, we're not saying we're done. We're saying, what do we do next? And so no, this is not a perfect house of welcome. And we're not trying to say to all of those of you who are new here, oh, this is the most amazing place in the whole area, and you need to come here because we're amazing. No, we're saying you are welcome here. And we're working on making sure that you feel that. But we will fail and we are imperfect. And so we will work on it again and again. Sometimes that's because of a lack of cultural sensitivity or just a lack of multicultural awareness or just a lack of knowledge. But there are also times when we fail our mandate for reasons that are a little bit more difficult, like change, because change is hard. Being radically welcoming is hard. But the good news here is we're committed to it. We're committed to being a church that broadens its welcome and understands, I think, that it is a religious mandate. It's at the core of our faith to welcome the stranger, to work to make ourselves more radically welcoming. And we understand that that ancient imperative to welcome the stranger means making a community where all belong, because there are so many rooms in this here house. So again, for those who are new here today, we're not perfect. And we're not saying if you come here because you want the perfect thing. We're saying come here if you want to be part of a circle, a community that's working to expand the circle of welcome wider and wider still. We are committed to it. And that's what I mean when I say radical welcome. Or to put it back into religious words. You guys, our house is so big. Please let's not just go back into the living room. And the answer is we are not. You are welcome here. Our house has many rooms and you are welcome in them. You can get a tour of them today if you wish. And indeed, if you feel not welcome, we'll build more rooms and make our house wider still. Welcome. Our closing words are by Kimberly Quinn Johnson. Kimberly Quinn Johnson is an African-American UU minister serving in the South Fork in Bridgehampton, New York, and her specialties are anti-racism and youth ministry. She writes, "We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are not perfect, but we are perfectly fitted for this day. We are not without fault, but we can be honest to face our path as we chart a new future. We are the ones we've been waiting for. May we be bold and courageous to chart a new future. May we have faith in a future that is not known. We are the ones we've been waiting for."